The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, welcome to Transfinder's webinar regarding best practices, how we are navigating uncharted territory. Very excited for our 6th webinar today. A lot of great items will be discussed. Just a quick note regarding our webinar. You will be able to hear myself and all of the panelists and the questions. We will not be able to hear you. So if you do have a question, please feel free to type those into that open question panel. Today's topic is managing the stress of COVID-19. So not only do we have to think about the students and the parents, but also our mechanics and drivers and our community. So we have a few school psychologists as our panelists today. Very excited for this topic. Before we dive on in, I do want to introduce Transfinder's CEO, Tony Civitella.
How's it looking on your side?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, everybody.
Is it saying waiting for host or something?
I can hear someone else talking, so hello, someone else is on the line. I can hear it. Just want to say thank you, everyone, and welcome. Kristen, I can believe it. We're actually at this point, it's our 6th best practices webinar with NYAPT. How exciting this is. And by the way, this is a different topic. I mean, you talked about how we're going to talk about it's really the emotional, how when we go back to school in the fall, how will it be? Really this, we've talked about some of the different things about social distancing and how to clean the buses, but this is the first time I've heard this type of topic of how we're going to be prepared really mentally, how we're going to be able to do this in the stress. I mean, let's face it, I can tell you myself how, there's a lot of stress even in my own house. How do we got to make sure that, my wife and myself and our son and our dog, which, by the way, I'm going to miss him so much when we do go back to the office. But these are things that, so bringing the psychologists here to help us. And by the way, one of them is also a transportation supervisor. This is such an important topic because I think we're all covered, how to clean the buses and what products you should use and what you should not use. And really the social distancing practice, which I think, I feel like, if I could, I almost need like a big ring around me. That way I would never be so close to somebody. Hopefully I'm a hugger, so hopefully that's just temporary. But how about mentally? So this is such a great topic. I know I'm going to be personally taking some notes, how I can deal with that in my own personal life, but this is a good one. And clearly we're all have a lot of things going on in our mind, and it's so good topic. So again, I want to thank Dave Christopher again for partnering on this very important issue, and always excited. I want to remind everybody, these webinars are always recorded. You could go on our transfinder.com website, and we have tons of recordings. So, if you're like, I can't take note fast enough, don't worry about it. You could listen to this thing in the future, but it's exciting. Again, Dave, thank you for partnering with us on, again, another awesome topic. Again, I'll be taking a lot of notes. So again, back to you, Dave. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Tony. So yes, this is a different topic. I guess one of the reasons we chose this topic was in speaking to a lot of, transportation folks around the state. There's a lot of stress out there in terms of how we're going to reopen schools and how we're going to deal with, staff, et cetera. Since COVID-19 pandemic started back in, and schools closed back in March, there's been a lot of change. I think everyone could agree with that. Transportation is no longer what we perceived it to be before pre-pandemic. Many people are without steady income. Some have seen major reductions in their incomes. Some people are rents are due, bills are. Some people haven't got enough food. Can you imagine that in our country, people not having enough food? So there's a lot of lack of clarity in how we're going to start school, how we're going to deliver services come now summer. Another stressor, right? We were kind of planning on trying to get geared up and ready to go in September, and now we're talking about a summer session. So these unprecedented times have unnerved a lot of people. A lot of people are stressed, and many people are in some form of crisis. I know in the capital region, one of the concerns is that drug abuse numbers are up, suicides, incidents of family abuse, and I think that's probably across the whole state. So these issues are going to affect us. They're going to affect our staff when they come back to work for us, the students, obviously. So I thought we would put this on the table today to talk about. I know that we do talk about mental health and stress in the schools, but given these unprecedented times again, I think it's a bigger issue that we really need to be aware of and that we need to be concerned about. So with that said, we've assembled a panel of people who can talk about this, and I'll introduce them. First, I'd like to introduce John Cooney, who's a retired Capital Region police officer and a certified mental health first aid trainer. I've seen John speak on TV on a lot of occasions when there's a major stressful issue in the Capital Region, different parts of the, different police agencies or TV news folks will bring him on to talk about, how to deal with those issues. And I've always been impressed by some of the things he had to say. We also have a school psychologist from Jericho School, Danielle Smith, and we're having a little technical difficulties getting Danielle on. Hopefully we'll have that resolved pretty quick. And we also have Lorianne Savino, past president of NYAPT and the director of transportation at Jericho Public Schools. So we'd like to just turn this over and have a discussion. Feel free to send in your questions to the chat. Rico, who is our moderator, will keep the conversation going as he always does. He does an excellent job with that. And we're off and running, Rick.
Thanks so much. And Lorianne, have you come on? If you are, there you are. Thanks so much, everybody. This is such an important topic. I just wanted to kind of set the table a little bit. Couple stories I just want to highlight. The Atlantic magazine recently had a story that had the headline, "Reopening school is the easy part." And then it went on to say that children of all ages have suffered from the coronavirus shutdown. Each age group faces distinctive social, emotional, and academic losses. And then an NPR story recently said that school closures were intended to keep students safe during the pandemic, but for many, it's ushered in a different set of dangers: anxiety, depression, other serious mental health issues. And I'm assuming that that's probably true for staff as well, drivers, teachers, and as Kristen mentioned, mechanics as well. So that's kind of the table that that we're sitting at today to discuss how we cope with those issues and maybe have a keen eye on things when there might be red flags for us. And I'm going to start actually with John. Well, I'm going to ask both of you, Lorianne, and then whenever Danielle jumps on, could you first just describe a little bit about your job, your work, and then Lorianne, if you could also describe, so you have a unique role as a transportation supervisor as well as a school psychologist. So if you could describe a little bit of that work and also just a little bit about your district, so we can kind of get a sense of the size, the scope of it. So John, just for starters, a little bit about yourself.
Certainly. 31 years in law enforcement brought me to retirement in 2014. And leaving law enforcement, I was very aware of the fact that I had gone through many of my own traumas. Trauma is a huge word, and sometimes we don't take it seriously enough, and sometimes we need to take it lighter than we do. But the point being is that leaving law enforcement and watching the first responders that I've worked with for decades, I really was able to understand that there's a lot going on that's not resolved and needs to be addressed. But in our jobs specifically, it was tough to do so. You didn't sit down with your buddy in a locker room and unload. You basically kept it to yourself. You didn't want to appear weak. You didn't want to appear not ready to defend on the street. So getting out of law enforcement, long story short for me, is I have engrossed myself in understanding mental health and understanding, most importantly, the things that affect mental health, and secondarily, the response that we have to those things, which in most cases is unhealthy coping mechanisms unhealthy not only to our bodies, but to our families, to our lives, to our relationships. So I'm all in, and through this time, I think more than ever, I've increased my awareness of the stressors and the results of those stressors in our lives.
That's great. That's super. That's great perspective to help us to see what we should be spotting when you're going through that stress that maybe you're not sharing publicly. Lorianne.
Just to clarify, I'm definitely not a school psychologist, although I am a very good listener. My role here today is to kind of be the voice of directors all over the state in our concerns in bringing our bus drivers and monitors back, along with the students and the parents who are all going to have some different kinds of level of anxiety, as well as we do. I mean, I'm sure that we're all sitting in the seat kind of anxious about what it's going to look like and what our role will be and how we're going to navigate. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So one of the things, and David, of course, I want you to jump in. You have that statewide perspective and obviously a very deep industry perspective. So jump in anytime. I'm going to throw out my first question to John, but Lorianne and whenever Danielle comes on as well, you guys can feel free to piggyback on this. Any question here really is relevant to any of you. But John, for starters, do you have any suggestions just for people who may be in attendance right now who are supervisors that will help them just prepare to welcome their staff back?
Sure. I think what we have to recognize, especially as a supervisor or someone offering some type of guidance or support to an employee staff, these are unprecedented times. And in normal times, if there ever was such a thing, but certainly before the pandemic, we find that approximately 48, close to 50% of adults will at some point in their lives experience a mental health crisis. The human brain is understandably an amazing machine, and just like a finely tuned car engine, it's going to break down and run rough once in a while. Well, now what we've added here, if we want to go to the analogy of the car engine that runs so well, now we're running up hills and it's hot and it's dusty, and that amazing instrument that guides us every day is under the most stress that probably we've seen in our lifetimes. So let's always remember that the potential for mental health concerns, mental health stressors has always been there at a very high rate. Well, now we're going to be so far beyond the norm that our supervisors and our fellow employees, peer-to-peer, need to be aware of the fact that signs and symptoms of depression, anxiety, and potential suicide or self-harm are going to be noticeable. We just have to say, I'm not going to be shy about it. I'm not going to be scared to ask the questions I need to ask. I'm going to make sure my brother in arms or sister is ready to go and healthy. So I think that's my main primary point, is that
what, like, just to paint a picture a little bit. So I am a supervisor and transportation supervisor. Can you give me a sense of, like, you know, I'm looking for something specific, like, do you have a welcome session? Do you do individual meetings with people? Do you do a mix of things to say, you know, hey, how are you doing? Is it emails? Is it, you know, what do you do to literally really paint like that picture for me of how do you welcome people back that you haven't seen in months, maybe, and you've been maybe just doing Zoom meetings or email?
Welcome session, yes. The welcome session has to have a purpose, though. It has to be to say that we understand that you're vulnerable right now. We understand that there may be negative changes that have occurred in your life, maybe affecting your health, your family relationships, etc. Don't worry about the fact that I need you to raise your hand today and tell me in front of all your peers or in front of this specific group what's going on in your lives, but understand that A, I'm ready and willing to hear whatever, and B, with a follow-up in a much more individualized manner, we are going to come to you and ask, hey, how are you? And how are you means so much more now. I catch myself often saying, I'm fine, how are you? And then I realized that 2 years ago, that's what we said. I just yesterday to a checkout person in a local retail store, I said, hey, how are you? And she stopped. And she hesitated. And I realized she's not good. That turned into a 15-minute checkout over in the corner of the store. But yeah, we have to have a welcome session, but we can't expect full disclosure and full, bearing of our hearts in a public atmosphere. That's still not the way we're going in society.
That's very good. Thanks, John. Yeah, one of my pet peeve comments, I can't stand, it's all good. It's all good. Like, it's not all good, man.
Always. Everything's fine.
Rick, if I could, one of the challenges I think we'll face with, reopening is the need to, social distance our people. Whereas in the past, transportation people are very social. They tend to gather in groups and, around groups and talk. And, so you can kind of, understand and feel out the issues with a particular person when they're in those types of situations. But given what we're up against now in terms of, the need to social distance and to stay apart, it's going to be a bigger challenge. So I think we have to be even more on our toes. Some operators are, some school bus operators are actually putting processes in place where the bus drivers staff will not even check into a central area. They'll go directly to their school bus in the lot so that they can't gather up and transmit virus. So I guess the managers or the supervisors who were on task at that time are going to have to be really tuned in to people because you want to see if somebody's under stress or in crisis before they get out on the bus and not when they're on the bus. So that'll be a bigger challenge when we reopen.
That's good.
Rick, I think Danielle is responding to me that we can hear her.
Okay, Danielle, can you speak? Well, Danielle, whenever you just keep trying, and as soon as I hear you, I promise you, I'll go right to you.
I'm going to have her pull my line.
I would put her on your phone, on your cell phone, Lorianne, and do it that way. That'll work.
Okay.
And just put your phone on speaker.
All right, so I'm going to stick with John then and just say, what should, again, a supervisor be looking for, maybe when an employee who, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Great question. You nailed it right there. And I apologize for cutting you short, but
no, not at all.
I'm energized by hearing that. Change. And change has to be measured against current conditions. So for the person to come in and say, these masks, I'm so sick of the mask and I can't stand it. You know what? I said that when I went into the doctor's office this morning. I had to go back to my car to get my mask. And I'm sure nobody wanted to listen to me when I was going to my car to get it. So there's going to be negativity involved with the change that's come along. Hopefully we can find positivity. But change will also be around the result of anxiety and depression. So accept the change and understand some change will be natural. But what we need to look for is those changes that probably attach themselves to a negative path. When someone is depressed and there's change, you'll see it in their eyes, you'll see it in their mindset, you'll see the fact that all of a sudden their attendance or they're getting in late or they seem a little shorter with people. That's when we're starting to make those mental notes that we may have to take a better look at what's going on with John. Meanwhile, when John's coming in and just complaining about having to clean the bus and I'm so sick of wiping down these seats, I'm so, all right, yeah, okay, I would be too. So we got to find balance and understand the difference between change that comes with change, if that makes any sense, but change that also brings with it negative coping mechanisms and negative reactions, which is when depression and anxiety become part of the problem. The negative coping mechanisms can be destructive. They can be so destructive, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few. But just make sure you balance those differences between change.
Hold on.
That makes perfect sense. All right, Lorianne, I'm going to go with you, and then whenever Danielle calls in, we'll be good. What's the thing that you're most concerned about when you think about students returning to school?
I think I have Danielle. Did you hear the question?
Yeah.
Oh, can you guys hear Danielle?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I'm going to let Danielle go, and then I'll follow.
Well, before we start with Danielle, I want you to feel part of the conversation here. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for the school, a little bit about the school, and then I'll ask the question again because I want you to feel part of the conversation.
Thank you. So my name is Danielle Smith. I have been a school psychologist for almost 20 years. I am very involved in my local organization. Probably about 5 years ago, I had started an organization on Long Island called Long Island Mindfulness and Resiliency Consortium for all school districts to be able to learn skills and work together as a team to be able to implement those skills within the school. I'm also involved in the Long Island Schools Practitioners Action Network, which is a crisis management team, which goes in to help support during times of crisis, and that training was through the National Association of School Psychologists, their pre-care model. So I've had a number of experiences working with other school districts, and along with being at Jericho for almost 20 years now.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're going to get a lot. I'm glad, Lori Ann, thank you for not giving up on Danielle. I think she's going to add a lot to the conversation. So the question, Danielle and Lori Ann, please jump in as well. What are you most concerned about when you think about students as they return to school following, this quarantining time period here?
Did you hear the question? Yeah.
Yes. Would you like me to respond to that?
Yes, thank
please.
you, Danielle.
So, I think because there is so much uncertainty, and I mean, think about as adults how we're struggling to navigate all of that. Now imagine children and adolescents that their brain isn't as wired, still under construction in certain aspects that we have the availability of. So I think that while I do feel like there is levels of trauma that exist, I would say a lot of us are very resilient. Probably a little bit more resilient than we think. I would say that there will be a core group of students that we really do need to focus on. And I think the more that we provide communication, constant communication, whether it be with the schools, parents, and individual students, the better, because then we can assess the level of risk that we're concerned about. We think about universal screeners. We think about, the small group instruction kids that we're concerned about, and then more of the at-risk kids that we're concerned about. But I would say that I do think in all the conversations that I've had with my organizations, my psychological organizations, school-based organizations, is really indicating that the more that we have open communication, dialogue, even with all the unknown, the better.
Yeah, we have an expression at Transfinder about that you can't, during times like this, you can't over communicate. You can't let things just kind of linger in a vacuum. So I'm going to throw this question out to Lori Ann first, but then I'd like to go back to Danielle, and then John, I want to piggyback with you as well. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. So Lori Ann, are there distress signs that you feel like you're going to need to train your drivers to recognize? And Danielle, I'd like you to piggyback on that as well.
Well, I think sometimes children display stress by behavioral attention-seeking kind of activity, or they might pick on other students on the bus, and there's a different underlying issue going on. I think that drivers are going to need to come in with a better sense of understanding and maybe patience. I think the other tricky part is we've trained drivers for so many years, less is more. Say less and a smile goes a lot further, but with masks coming into play and this uncertain time, I think that it's going to be a challenge for the drivers to know how to manage students, even just with a first hello.
Right. How about you, Danielle? Anything sign-wise that drivers should be on the lookout for? Like, what kind of behavior will you see maybe students displaying as they return to school?
Yeah, I would agree with Lori Lorian, I do think a lot of the behaviors that we may see are, some irritability, aggressiveness, especially with children. Because with children, especially when we're dealing with anxiety or stress, they're hyperarousal. So they may feel like really irritable, poor concentration, withdrawal a little bit. Adolescence is a little different. You'll see more poor concentration, agitation, but you also see some more delinquent behavior. So that's something to be, on the lookout for.
Very good.
And I agree with Lorian. I know with bus drivers having my own daughter who has gone to kindergarten this year, and my son for the first time being on a school bus who's older. The bus driver was like integral. I didn't realize how important that relationship with the bus driver was until I experienced it. And really realizing that level of connection between the bus driver and the individual. And to Lorian's point, the concept of the mask, can be challenging.
That's very good insights.
Oh, she has 2 solutions. Let's hear them.
Let's hear them.
Listen, I do think body language, the nonverbal, is huge, and we shouldn't overlook that. We do see a smile in our eyes, and that is something kids have been accustomed to seeing masks, unfortunately, so that's not something that's so new for them.
Yes.
I just had a conversation with the psychologist this morning, and we were talking about those masks that have the cutout to the mouth. That's that clear mask that shows the smile, so you can see the mouth. And I think while some of them do look a little unusual, I think it may be better than not to that. So being a person that does heavily rely on connection and warmth and seeing that physical nature myself, I know working with my students, I'm going to want to prefer to have that facial availability so they can see my mouth.
And did you get your other point in? One was for
Did you get both points,
body
Danielle?
language.
Yeah.
The body language is really key. So like openness, shoulders, the eyes.
Well, there's
really
2 things.
Important.
I was talking to someone last night actually who told me that there's a study out there that, again, I haven't verified it, so I probably shouldn't share, but that the online video chats kids are finding that to be exhausting, and even adults, because what's missed is the body language, and that there's actually an anxiety that comes from only seeing, partial, and you're not getting the full. And it actually creates an exhaustion of sorts. The other thing I was going to say was, if you ever watched the TV show MASH, I know I'm dating myself here, Hawkeye had a way of smiling with his eyes. So there is a way to, you can tell when someone's smiling. I'm not saying you shouldn't get the mask that has the smile, but I'm just saying there is a way to communicate, that as well. Wouldn't you say, Danielle?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And to your point of that, I mean, I don't know the study that exists, but I can speak really for myself. I say it all the time. Like, I present a lot to different organizations, and I'm going to say doing it on Zoom is so much more challenging because I am a more action-oriented person.
Yes.
Standing up, moving around, engaging with individuals, it's really challenging and very stressful.
Yep, I agree. John, I'm going to go on the adult side of things now here. We just talked about kids and how to be recognizing distress signs with kids. How about on the staff side of things? What signs of distress? And you touched on it a little bit, but what would you say would be the ones that would be maybe considered more concerning than others? Is there some key 2 or 3?
I'm thinking about the employee per se, and one thing we may not think of that we have to give them some type of way to go with is they're going to be under more pressure now from the parents. I can easily see early on when we return to hopefully transportation, whether there's masks involved, questions as to, well, how clean is your bus? Somebody do the bus today? Did they write down this or that? And the drivers now are going to be challenged by a whole set of concerns brought to them by parents So although they hopefully can answer most of those easily, well, don't worry, we sanitize the buses, whatever we are not the expert. So they're going to have challenges from the parents more now than they ever have. And secondly is, I'm just thinking of if they are challenged and have concerns about their own well-being, they have to know where to go with them. So many times we say, well, if you're feeling down, reach out. If you're feeling down, get a hold of somebody to talk to. I know law enforcement and first responders, EAP is always one of our options, but even that's difficult because they say, well, who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to call? And often I don't have a direct answer for that. So I would just urge that the administrators in these programs really go out of their way to make sure that if someone is under the stress of the change and the newness of the change, that it's specific who to talk to. I really want to know a name or a number. I don't want to just be told it's okay to talk, see someone, get it off your chest. So, I mean, that's the number one thing, is that we can go somewhere with our concerns. And secondly, I'm a little off track here, but it's on my mind. Negative coping mechanisms are alcoholism now. We just have to be aware of the fact that some people are going to come back from this pandemic. I can tell
John,
you.
You're breaking up a little bit on me, so maybe you come a little closer to the mic as well.
Sure.
Just so,
Sure, 1, 2, check. Let's try this.
That's much better.
John?
Yes.
Would you suggest that the directors, that the people who are running the operations, actually reach out to professional services prior to our staff coming back, so that we have those resources available if and when a problem would show itself?
That's the $1 million question. What we find, what's frustrating in law enforcement, with EAP not being readily available at times, or even available at all, but how disappointing is it for someone to come forward and say, you know what, you're right, I really am in a bad place, and I would love to talk about it with someone. And then we say, like, well, I'll get back to you and let you know. We'll have to find somebody to get you to talk to. So how cool would it be to say, okay, here's 2 numbers actually. This would be a female. This would be, that may be one thing, because we do find often that people are more comfortable disclosing gender is a factor at times. So we've got these resources for you. I'm not saying we're worried too much about the male and female, but that's the example. Here's a couple, and here's why this one is this and this one is that. Rather than, okay, hold that thought. I know you may be thinking about self-harm or suicide, but we've got to find somebody who can talk to you, and then we'll go with it. Now let's get our ducks in a row, and it's probably one of my most frustrating challenges with first responders is doing that. So I think you guys are going to handle it much better.
Danielle? Are you there, Danielle?
Yeah. Yeah.
Danielle, do all school districts have personnel services for staff members who might be having a challenging or difficult situation to deal with?
Yeah, so I love what John had mentioned, because I do feel like the more that you have information readily available to them, like his point, making sure that somebody is present then, because it is really important. I know within our district, Maureen, you may have seen an email that I sent out a couple of weeks ago to staff,
Yes.
basically through both of our unions and our insurance company. And I contacted both of them to find out the procedure, because while the teachers come to me and they will talk to me about their personal issues on occasion, I know that some of them may not feel that comfortable doing that. So I wanted to have alternative resources available to them. And to my surprise, the organization, the union and night shift has great resources available. And the individual who I spoke with was a licensed mental health worker who was able to provide those resources immediately. So I then shared that with the staff. So I think
I have a question
up front and really make sure that they're available, because that is key and crucial.
Thank you, Danielle. So I have a quick question, and I'm going to start with David. Lori Ann, it might be something for you as well. So if you do have somebody who's under a lot of stress, and they decide to make themselves available for those types of resources, they may have some concerns that there might be repercussions on them, like you can't drive the bus while you're going if you're getting counseling for, I mean, how do you deal with those kind of concerns that would keep somebody who maybe actually does recognize that they need some help, but they might feel like there's repercussions if I do avail myself of that? David, I'll start with you.
Yeah, a couple things to keep back to the mental health access point. I think if you refer to the CDC considerations that were released a while back, there's a suggestion that all school districts have someone on staff to provide that service. Just an FYI. Good point, Rick. I think, excuse me. I think first of all, confidentiality, right? I mean, you got to be confidential about this. Whoops. You might have to switch speakers here. Excuse me.
You mean presenters or speakers?
Dave's choking.
I'm just kidding.
Go over to Lorianne while I. Oh my gosh.
Well, I'll go to Lorianne and we'll come back to you, David.
Give me a
There
minute.
repercussions if somebody comes and tries to say, I do need some help?
Well, definitely make sure that you're in an area where you can keep privacy at the utmost part. I mean, they might even start talking to you in the middle of a driver's room. Just have the common sense to pull them aside and say, come into my office for a moment, and then support them with whatever they need for as long as they need. Even with a simple cold or a virus or a flu, I've never taken the approach that you have a responsibility, you have to come to work, figure it out. I've always taken the approach that come back when you're 100% and you're fit for duty, because children's lives are in your hands. So that would be my approach. Of course, we're dealing with a driver shortage, so saying that might mean I have to go drive their route, but it is what it is, Rick.
Okay, but there's no if I come in, you immediately are going to be taken off the road because.
No.
Okay, there's no so you might need to allay those fears that someone may have, like I can't go forward because I may lose my job. Is that possible? Someone might be concerned about that?
Well, I think in these times it's possible that we all feel that way, right? On one level or another. So yeah, that would certainly be a concern of a driver coming and sharing a situation or a problem they might be dealing with. We can only support them and give them an avenue that they can investigate to get the help and support them.
David?
I think I've recovered. I was quiet for so long, I think I forgot how to talk. I think Lorianne hit a lot of good points. I think that you got to create an environment where the drivers feel comfortable to go to someone in the operation and talk about, their concerns. And it might mean that they have to come off the road, but I think if you deal with that in a empathetic, caring way, I don't think it's seen as a threat. And I think that's the way you have to, operate. It's certainly important to have that type of environment because you want the drivers to come to you or to somebody in your operation in some form of authority and say, I'm not feeling right. I'm having some stress. I'm having some issues, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable being out on the road. And you also got to have people in your operation, whether you're a one-man show or you're a larger operation, that can identify those types of situations, because you want drivers going out there physically and mentally able to do the job well and safe. It's a stressful job in itself. And you don't want to send somebody into that situation where, they're not capable of handling it.
I think another point, Dave, is that we have to be available for them to feel comfortable enough to say something to us. If we're sitting in our bunkers, so to speak, and hiding out and not making ourselves available, they might not be so likely to come and say, I have an issue. So I think the more they see us, the more it might trigger them to say, oh, you know what, let me just go talk to her. She's been around a lot. Yeah. Because I think that they're going to need that.
That was my point earlier with the social distancing that's necessary, where people really need to stay apart. It's going to be a bigger challenge when schools reopen because you're going to have processes in place to keep people apart. versus bringing them together. And that's going to have to be addressed by, you know, school transportation directors and supervisors and managers, so that so you know what's going on out there.
Here, John, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, this is, I'm hearing everything that's said, and you guys have it really nailed. But it's something that's, boy, I lose sleep over this, to be frank with you. Having resources in place for employees to turn to is an absolute, it has to be there. But we need to help the employees understand that if they're coming to someone within the system and disclosing concerns that aren't necessarily going to really question their ability to drive and to work, that answers, solutions will be offered, and it will remain confidential to a point. I mean, if it's a employee within the district, that's the one that they're coming to, we understand that there's accountability by that employee to the supervisors to report so much information. But on the other hand, if someone comes to you and talks out the fact they're depressed and really kind of wondering where to go next with it, and you, through just good advice, say, see your family doctor, go with that, and they end up on antidepressant. That's really something we work very hard now with crisis intervention for first responders, helping them understand that antidepressants do.
Come back to the mic a little bit.
I'm sorry, antidepressants do work, and I don't want to make this a medical discussion, but on the other hand, it's a remedy to some of the stressors that are out there. So my point being is that it's not necessarily going to get a driver taken off the road if they're on an antidepressant. And in fact, if they need an antidepressant, it's probably better they're on them doing their work. So let's make sure our sources really stress the confidentiality up until the point where if you do acknowledge you're looking to hurt yourself or you're feeling that you may hurt someone else, yeah, I'm obligated. I have to go somewhere with that. No doubt about it. But if you tell me you're sad and you're anxious and maybe need advice, I may send you to a family doctor, and that's going to be between you and I. And I kind of got a feel for the pupil transportation population. My brother-in-law headed a program in our local district. Yeah, we need to guarantee confidentiality up until that point where it can't be. But if it can be, then we need to help them understand that we'll talk to them and work with them and get them to where they need to go. There's such a fear of it being brought to the chief in police terms.
Right. David, I'm going to go back to you. You made a reference earlier about some drivers going right to their buses, and Shirley asked a question, one of our attendees. She says, I've heard some districts are having drivers go directly to their buses, but this goes against dispatch having eyes on every driver for reasonable suspicion. And she goes, as a result, there have been recent cases, unfortunately, of drivers under the influence while operating a school bus. Any thoughts on that?
Shirley's right. There is a requirement to have eyes on the driver to make sure that they're, not under influence or physically capable of driving the bus. What the folks that I talk to are going to do is put supervisors out in the lots, in the bus parking lots, and meet those drivers as they come in. So it's going to require a little change in thought process in terms of how you get your drivers out on the road. The alternative is to bring them to a central location where they see a dispatcher or a driver, or to get their keys and whatever. And that's a problem because they're gonna collect up in a small location. So every school is every carrier, operator, school district is gonna figure this out on their own. Certainly, there's no mandate that you do it any one way. But if you do send them directly to their lots, you're gonna have to be out there to check them to make sure. And I had seen this done in another state where, a large lot with a lot of drivers, a lot of buses, a lot of drivers came in and went directly to their buses, and there were 2 or 3 supervisors. That's just a matter of practice, and it worked. And this was a pretty high functioning school district, so it does work. It's not what we're used to for the most part in New York, but it might be something we have to give some consideration to.
Very good. One comment that it doesn't, unfortunately, the visual doesn't always happen. You probably have heard that.
Oh, yeah.
So, Lorianne, obviously the goal as school reopens, parents and students, they want to feel safe. Parents especially want to feel safe that they're putting their students on the school bus. So I wanted to know if you had any suggestions to help them kind of put them at ease.
Well, I know in Jericho, we've worked on putting a task force together, and I think we started this webinar with talking about the importance of communication. So I think any kind of notices or information that can be put out to the parents, sooner than later, so that they know we're taking extra measures to make sure that their children are safe to and from school. I think that's going to be our best line of defense. Be it a memo or a flyer or an email, or a Zoom, talking about all the steps that we're taking in order to keep their children safe and our bus drivers safe. Did you have anything to add to that, Danielle?
Yeah, actually, I love what you're saying, Lorianne, because I do think the more communication clearly, the better. One of the things that was recommended, and it was an interesting perspective, was to show videos of the buses actually getting cleaned for the staff, just for the bus drivers themselves, and that could help decrease the level of anxiety and stress surrounding, potential contamination so that they can see. And then the other thought was showing even a video to parents of whether it be the bus driver or doing like a vlog with a picture of the bus driver without a mask on, with like a little blurb about the bus driver. I would think that that's probably geared more for the elementary, potentially middle school, high school. They may not care, but I do feel like for the well-being of the bus driver and of the individual student, that can really help. That can go a long way.
That's a good idea.
That's great. I love it. Very practical.
Could I just add something to that? We're going to spend, it's going to take some skill and some time and some effort to watch over our staff to make sure they're okay, and to help them when problems arise. But the alternative is we lose them, right? Maybe they don't stay with us. Maybe it's so stressful that they're not going to come back to work with us. So we went into the pandemic with a serious bus driver shortage. So if we lose 5% of those people because it's too stressful a job, that puts us even farther behind the 8 ball. So I know it's difficult to say, but I think we've got to really address these issues of mental health and stress and crisis, because we want these people to stay with us if they can, and particularly with drivers and mechanics. Mechanics are very short. It's tough to get good mechanics too. So, and it's tough to get good transportation supervisors. So I think we all need to understand this is a problem that we need to address if we're going to keep the industry safe and with good people in it, because they're not going to stay unless we address this.
That's good. I'm going to send this question to John and to Danielle. I'm going to go with John first. People like Lorianne, holding things together, supervisor. Well, how do we help her? They may have stresses too, and so they're got to be strong for their department. But how do what kind of guidance would you have to help those who are in leadership, who maybe feel like they don't have the luxury of getting help themselves?
Great question, and I can apply it to primarily my professional reviews also. What about the people who are trying to lead the cause and making sure everyone's okay? But then again, whoops, we got to think about their well-being. I will say that knowledge is strength. There's no doubt about it. Those of us in a higher position, as far as higher only in the fact that we're more responsible than most, have to recognize that we are handling the stressors of the workforce and ourselves, and it's totally understandable that there's going to be those times when we feel defeated, when we feel weak, when we feel challenged. I can only say in that regard that you have to give yourself the opportunity to get help if you need it. Boy, it's funny, we think that our leaders have to be looking out for everybody else and making sure they get to proper resources for help, mental health concerns, when in fact my opinion has always been that it's those leaders that probably have the most need and the most hopefully the most opportunity to get to I don't know, just to deal with those mental health stressors. And I myself have found that EAP to my supervisors and to myself has been a huge resource. We have to know that we can go somewhere with our concerns. So it's up to the highest points in the organization to make the point that here is who you can call, here is who you can talk to. And to be brutally frank, we need to get off the mindset of, well, I'm the guy in charge, so you can talk to me if you have problems because you're kind of in charge. Sometimes we need to get out of that loop into a different loop to be able to talk freely, to be able to get the help we need. And that may honestly need medication, it may need therapy. They're all really good things. But for our leaders, we have to let them know that there is, again, it's about finding a place for them to go and feel safe going there.
You may actually be, you're leading by example, even though you may think that you look weak. In some ways, you may be actually setting a tone that would resonate with the rest of your staff. Danielle, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, actually, I love this question, and Lorianna actually talked about that a little bit ago, because they said, how can you pour from a pitcher that's empty? So being the person who is viewed as, being in charge, really taking care of, being, the helpers, really is self-care is so important. And I know that's an overstated concept that people keep throwing around, but it really is vital at this point. Sleep hygiene, dietary hygiene, physical hygiene is really our best friend right now. And leading from example, I think even the connections that you all have right here is helpful. Really having supports for each other. I know, similar to Lorianne, I'm the only psychologist in my building right now. Sometimes I feel like I'm on an island by myself. So it is important to have those connections with other people who are also in the same types of positions as I'm in, to be able to help to cultivate those well-being practices. So I do feel like it is a lead by example, but I also think that the availability should be given to those individuals as well.
Very good. All right, we are wrapping up. We're getting close to the hour mark here. It always goes by so fast. I'm going to ask you all to give me one takeaway. So it's that idea that someone hears this, and obviously they can go back and they can point their supervisors or anybody else on their team to the webinar, which will be posted on transfinder.com, maybe as early as tomorrow. But what would be one thing that you'd want someone to remember when they go back to the office? I'm going to start with you, Danielle, just because I don't see your face. I want to make sure I don't forget you. So Danielle, what's one takeaway that you want attendees to have with them as they leave?
I think communication is key. I think the more communication, whether it be through video, messages, even surveys to the workers, just having discussions, the better.
Great, super. I'm going to go to you, Lorianne, since you are her connector.
Well, I'm going to put down the half gallon of ice cream, okay? I'll try to go for a walk. My takeaway will definitely be to reach out and get my resources in order for if and when a driver or an attendant comes to me, or a dispatch or a mechanic who's sharing some kind of concern, that I have resources where I can send them. That's my takeaway.
That's super. Thank you. John?
From a personal perspective, as part of my own experience in life, if you're not comfortable going to the people that you know and work with and feel hopefully comfortable with, sounds like a double entendre there, but the bottom line is that you always have your family doctor. They are very knowledgeable as far as how to deal with depression and anxiety patient. They're not only looking for viral plagues and fevers. They're looking for mental health concerns. They will put you on the right path. Medication and therapy are part of that process. And if you can't go to somebody at work, which we so hope you can, still never forget your family doctor will get you to a good place with your mental health if you trust them and give them an opportunity to do so.
And that's also a recommendation that you can tell your staff to tell, so yes, you as a supervisor, but also telling your staff, go to, your family doctors might be a good first step.
They're very well screened and trained by the drug companies for whatever reasons. Don't get into that. It's simply the matter that they know what they're talking about when it comes to depression screening, and they'll give you the proper medication to get you going in the right direction.
That's super. David.
I like simple solutions. I think you treat your people as you'd want to be treated, and if they have issues or concerns, hear them out and help them find solutions. I think that's part of the leader's job, and you can't take it lightly in this environment we're in, because people are under some, back to the unprecedented stresses that we've never experienced before. So treat people like you'd want to be treated.
I think when you rise to the occasion during this time, they will never forget it. So
Right.
When times go back to normal, but you were there for them in this crazy environment, that bond will be so much tighter. John, you talked about policing. When you go through the thick with somebody, you never forget. That bond is so much tighter, right? On the other end.
Like Fandor sisters.
Tony Civitello, you still on? I'd like to see if you could give us a takeaway before we close out.
How you doing? Hi, Lorianne. I had in my notes that you're a psychologist. I mean, I didn't even question it because you've been a great.
That's what David told me. I'm gonna have to talk to David
If
later.
you're not certified, I apologize to take any credit away from you.
My bad.
You've been great, but guys, great conversation. I got to tell you, one of my takeaway is that don't take things for granted. Anything that we thought everyone's great, everyone's all happy. And, we have a good job. Sometimes, we have to smile, but we're not really smiling inside. So that's my biggest takeaway the past 3 months is that I will never take things for granted ever again. Don't assume that it's what it looks like. Sometimes you just have to dig a little bit and people will talk to you. So great topics, guys. Thank you so much for talking about this. This is again, Dave, like I said to you before, no one's talking about this, and clearly it is top of mind, and it should be. So
Important topic.
It's great. I
Great
don't mean
topic.
to do a commercial, but I've been reading this book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And today's chapter was all about taking care of yourself socially, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, and that we're all those components. And so I was listening to that while I was on the treadmill. So I'm like, okay, I'm knocking off 2 things right there. Anyway, I want to thank our panelists so much, and I think we have so much more we could talk about. And maybe David, if you don't mind, maybe we'll bring him back on and we'll let everybody see what Danielle looks like. Very, very appreciative. So I wanted to thank you again, David, and NYAPT for your leadership. We are at the epicenter of all of this, and you have just provided such great leadership. And I want to thank all those who attended and the great questions we had. We were able to get to the questions, and we want you to know again, it's on transfinder.com. It'll be on probably tomorrow. And if you want to pass this along to any of your colleagues that you think would benefit from hearing from this, I'm sure they would. One thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, that if you do have a story about how you have coped, you have any kind of aspect that what we just talked about, or anything else that's helped your district succeed in dealing with the pandemic, or as you're planning for reopening, please send it to mystory@transfinder.com. Any school district in North America, we really want to hear these stories. And to be honest with you, they either could become a white paper, they might be part of a future webinar. At the end of the day, we really believe that we're learning from each other because we're all kind of going through it together. We're kind of, figuring it out. So please, please, please send that your story to mystory@transfinder.com. We'll follow up with you. And then finally, mark your calendars for Tuesday, June 25th. It'll be here before you know it. At 1 p.m., it'll be our next best practices webinar with NYAPT. These have just been invaluable. So until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Bye all.
Bye.
I know.
Danielle.